Welcome to the Wisdom Window on Strong Island Radio. The Wisdom Window is your portal to timeless knowledge and understanding. Join us each episode as Maddi and Marianne Franzese examine ancient and current wisdom traditions and apply these teachings to today's unique challenges. So let's get started and welcome your hosts, Maddi and Marianne. Okay, we're all set. Go for it.
Okay. Hello and welcome to the Wisdom Window. I'm Maddi Cheers and I'm here with my co-host, Marianne Franzese. Hi, Mare.
Hi, Maddi.
And we are very pleased to have a very special guest today, Tal Mandelbaum. Tal is a social psychologist and spiritual teacher. She is a Kabbalist, focusing on the skills we need for spiritual connection. And she's joining us from her home in Israel to start the Wisdom of Kabbalah Part 1. We're going to do 2 in this series, and we're calling this one Finding the One. So Tal, thank you so much for being with us. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you, Maddi.
So I have a question. Why do you think that in our day and age, young people are having so much trouble finding the one, the partner, the one they need to be with, and even the whole concept of oneness is very out of fashion right now? So I just thought maybe you'd like to speak to that.
Yes, certainly. Well, I think you said it. It's something that is happening in our days. And I think as we know, our culture, our societies have become more and more individualistic. We've become very far from the community and the village style life that we used to have, where marriages were, organized, people would get help finding a match, people were quite similar. And in our times, we've become a global village. So you go online and you try to find a partner, and it's very diverse, and you meet people who are very, very different. And at the same time, we're not really being helped. We're not being taught. Like, we have a lot more people to choose from, but nobody's teaching us and giving us the skills and the knowledge of how to choose a partner and even how to be in a relationship. And part of this individualization of our cultures also means that we are becoming a lot more, they say we're a narcissistic culture. We're becoming a lot more self-focused. And so we have all of our needs and our emotions, and everything is about me. And we're not learning how to connect to other people. And so even if people do find people to date, they don't always know how to form that healthy relationship, that deep connection that can really last and overcome the hurdles of relationship. And we all know that, divorce is rising, and we even know that less and less people even want to be in a relationship because our evolved ego, our evolved individual begins to see that being in a relationship means work. It means certain sacrifices. It means that you have to accommodate another person in your life. And we're seeing that there is a decline in people's willingness to even be in that space. And I think the reason is that in our individual culture, we need a lot more teaching. We need a lot more skills in order to learn what the benefits are of doing this work, what we can really gain from relationship. And once we learn that, once we become more connected to ourselves, to spirit, to nature, to the truth of our life, we'll also be able to create relationships that work, that are sustainable over time, and that really fulfill us. And then we'll have the motivation to do that work.
So in Kabbalah, when it's teaching about relationship with each other and connection to nature, I found it really interesting that you use the word sustainable relationships. It makes me think that if we could figure out how to sustain a relationship with another person, to follow through on that commitment, we could also sustain our relationship with nature, that it all seems to be part of the same concept.
Yes, it's really all one thing. It's all one system. And it's interesting because in the wisdom of Kabbalah, the teaching is that there's that saying, love thy friend or thy neighbor as thyself. That is like the motto, right? That's the formula for enlightenment. And for a long time, when I started studying this wisdom, I asked myself, like, why is it all about connection? Why is spiritual enlightenment connected to our ability to love others or to connect? And that's really the secret. The secret is that our evolution is leading us towards higher states of consciousness, and they are revealed in the connection between people. And nature, it's that system around us. And we know nature is a connected, integral system. And right now, we as human
Right.
beings, as I was saying, we've come to this individualized culture where it's all about the me, it's all about self-love, fulfillment. It's all about the self. And now the leap that we need to make, the next step, is to understand that to really fulfill ourselves, to really experience love and all the fulfillment that we want, we need to learn how to connect to this system that is nature. And that connection is what we practice together with each other, because we are that system. It's in us.
Right.
So,
In Lynn McTaggart's work, she does work and she's done study with, she calls it the power of eight because her circles are groups of 8 people. And in her studies, what she found is that when you have a circle of 8 or small circles, she's a big believer, like in Kabbalah, it's a circle of 10. And let's say you're setting your intention and their intention is to heal someone or heal something in the world. What she found that to me really relates to Kabbalah is that the people who were setting the intention were as healed as the people they were trying to heal or the situation they were trying to heal, that they came away with a more enlightened, connected, loving feeling towards everything in the world. And I think that, like you said, we're not sharing these teachings. It's her position that the powers that be, whoever they may be, want to kind of suppress these teachings so we don't get in touch with how powerful we really are as individuals and as a group.
yes, that reminded me as you were talking that, like I said, the concept for human evolution and for happiness is connection. It's connection to nature, to spirit, and to each other. And when we think about how we approach relationships in our times, it's always through how I can get the love that I need, how I can find somebody to love me, to care for me, to make me feel good, right? That is the concept that our culture just kind of takes for granted, that that's the way it is. You want to find somebody to be with because you want to feel loved and you need that and you have your needs. And it's completely the opposite way around. To really be happy in a relationship, to really find that happiness, we need to switch our thinking from how can I feel loved to how can I learn to love another. And then it's like you said, when I learn how to love another, when I learn how to really come out of what I call my ego consciousness and begin to feel my partner and what they need, how I can fill them, that's when I become really full. Like you
Mm.
said, when you have the intention for someone else, when you want to heal someone else, when you want to give to someone else, that's when all that goodness flows through you to others. And that is really the only way that we can feel truly full. Because when we try to fill ourselves by ourselves, that is very, very limited. We only have a very limited capacity to enjoy ourselves by ourselves. When you think about even food or sex or any of the joys of our life or shopping or even success, it's all very short-lived because you feel full for a moment and then the next moment you're off to find your next fulfillment. And that is just the nature of things. That is the mechanics of trying to feel happy within yourself. And there's psychological research on this, on how whatever fulfillment you find, even if it's winning the lottery, people will always go back to their baseline of happiness after a while, and it will never fill them completely. And here is where we need to make that switch, that to truly find happiness, fulfillment, we need to start to fulfill others. That's infinite. When you become a channel for other people's happiness and love and joy, that's when you can, if that's like the ever flowing well.
Wonderful.
Well, what brought you to this study and to Kabbalah specifically as your like source of wisdom? How did you get there?
Well, I suppose life brought me to it. I believe we're like, we're like magnets or electrical charges in a field and we're constantly being moved from place to place according to what we desire. And then finally we find the right place, or even if it's for the time being, and that's where we stay. So that's what I feel, that life brought me to Kabbalah. And the truth is, my spiritual awakening started with a search for healing, for physical healing. And I went through all of the books and all the teachings and all the methods. And I had a long list, like a bucket list of spiritual teachings that I wanted to get through. And Kabbalah was right at the bottom. Like I never thought I would study anything that had to do with Judaism, because it was very secular and I didn't even know what it was. What is Kabbalah? I had no idea. And I felt very like distant from anything that had to do with religion. And then life just happened. I was doing Buddhism. I had a Buddhist teacher. He was from Thailand, and he told me, he said, you know what, you're like confusing yourself with too many things. He said, you need to go to the source of wisdom. And he said, you have to choose. Either you learn from the Buddha, like the Buddha's book, he called it, or you learn from the Bible. And I remember I looked at him and I had no idea what he was talking about. Because here I am trying to find enlightenment through very practical, means, through a practice like meditation, like I was doing Vipassana. And he's talking to me about a religious book. I had no idea. And it wasn't until a couple years later that I discovered that there was a deep spiritual method within these texts that's hidden in there. It's been hidden in there for 2,000 years. And it's now becoming revealed. And I felt like it was talking about everything I had learned until then, but in a much deeper way, in a much more, I would say even more challenging way, because I thought I knew so much. And then I came to Kabbalah and was like, oh my God, I don't understand anything about this. And I'm a very ambitious person, and that kind of tempted me to delve in there and see what it's all about. And that was over 13 years ago. And since then, I've been finding that this is my home.
Wow. And I think that's, in a way, I love the way you say that this is your home, because that is what I feel like young people especially are looking for, is some kind of home, is some place to belong. And a lot of it, like you said earlier, they're looking for it inside themselves alone, or if they're making connections with people outside, it's a cause, or it's a project. It's rarely is it walking down that path of making spiritual connection. Though I think the young people in our circles, the young women in our circles, really are looking for that. And they find, though, that when they bring that to their friends make fun of them for walking down the spiritual path. So it's really, in this day and age for young people, it's an act of courage to continue following, speaking about, professing the need for oneness and relationship and love and forgiveness. They're ridiculed for that. It's like Marianne and I were talking earlier about how the excuse is, well, we tried that in the 60s and it didn't work, except it did. And I love the concept in Kabbalah of corrections. So when I look at what happened with the 60s, peace and love, and ultimately ending the Vietnam War and civil rights and all of that, that was one correction. But there are many corrections. Just because it didn't lead to ultimate enlightenment and, abundance of food and water and everything for everybody, doesn't mean it didn't start us on that step, on that path, I should say. So maybe my question now is, what is this concept of corrections?
Wow. Okay. I have a lot to say about everything you touched on right now.
Okay. Good thing we have two shows.
So first of all, corrections, to explain that, we really need to understand our internal mechanisms and who we are right now and where we want to go. Because correction is really what we're here to do. We're here to take what we got from nature. We got this, I call it the ego. Kabbalah calls it the ego. This is our nature. It's who we are. It's our state of separateness. This is the consciousness that we received. We have this body that's really like an animal body, like any other animal. And then we have a consciousness that we're separate from everything around us. And that's how we start our lives. And well, I'll talk about what you were just saying about the hippies. It's interesting because it's really, there's an evolution of consciousness since the beginning of humanity. We are always evolving our understanding of who we are and what society is and how societies are supposed to be built. And so far, what's evolved in humanity is that individual self, right? And if you guys are aware of, there's actually a psychological model called spiral dynamics, if you've heard of it. And it also speaks about that evolution of consciousness. And they call this stage that where we are really at the tip of this stage called the first tier, they call it, which is all our personal evolution. What's growing all throughout history is really our ego, our individualism. And towards this later stages in our evolution, people are beginning to feel like they need, like you were saying, like the hippies, we need peace and love and we need community and we need that. But it was still just one stage of our evolution. It was still on a limited egoistic perception. There wasn't really that leap that this model talks about and Kabbalah talks about into what we call interpersonal consciousness or unity consciousness. The consciousness was still quite simple. And that's why you can see people who talk about peace and love and they think that that's what we need in the world and we need social justice and we need, but they still don't know how to do it. And they might still be maybe even hateful towards people who don't think like them. Or they can experience this, the thoughts and the intentions, like what they say they want might be true on the outside, but the internal shift that is necessary to actually achieve it, we haven't gotten there yet. That's the leap. That's where we need to go. That's the second tier that the psychologists are talking about. And this is what Kabbalah teaches. How do we go from that ego consciousness to that second tier, that higher consciousness, the unity consciousness? And that's where we take that mechanism that we were given from nature, which is self-centered. It's not a bad thing. It's just the way we're built. I mean, if you ask psychologists, it's just the way that our psychology is. We always, even when you think about perception of reality, we only perceive a very limited amount of stimuli from the billions of stimuli outside of us. And our mechanism is that we only perceive what is either good for us or bad for us, right? That's like the mechanism of survival. We're going to only perceive what is relevant to me. And so that is blocking out 99% of reality. And what we want to do in our evolution of consciousness is to begin to expand and open up that border and open up ourselves to what's outside, to the true reality, to the greater reality. And we do that through connection by beginning to truly feel like other people are part of me and to shift my focus to to fulfilling them, to become that channel. That's how I expand my consciousness. I expand my reality. And we know that experience of lower level consciousness within myself is also often very difficult. It's where we see an epidemic of loneliness, an epidemic of depression, an epidemic of anxiety in our societies that are, already very evolved in this, in this level. And so we feel like there needs to be some change. We see that our world is falling apart. We see that some change needs to take place. And this is the leap. The leap is into connection, a consciousness of connection. And it's something we need to learn. It's something we need to practice. It doesn't happen through, politically correct speech. It only happens through actual internal change and learning.
I agree. And that's where partnership is so important. So when we're looking at finding the one we're going to be a partner with, that seems to me to be step one. So I'm now going to include one other person. And then you have children. And then that's more people you're including and putting before yourself. Lynn McTaggart, what she says is, we need to get away from self-help and go to other help. I love that. I love that concept. So simple and so pure. But that's what it seems like young people are having a very hard time with, is this commitment even to one other person, and then using the excuse that, well, the world's so bad, I don't want to bring in children.
I understand them. This is it's really hard. It's really difficult. And going back to corrections, this is the correction that we need to make. And perhaps relationship with another person, like our romantic partner, can be even more difficult than making these corrections with people who are like our peers, like a group, like the work that you do, perhaps in a circle. I think we all need that kind of supportive environment where we can practice this kind of higher consciousness or new attitude towards others, and then we can bring that sort of correction or that sort of new attitude into our partnership. But because
Mhm.
our romantic relationship, it can trigger us on so many levels, and it's also physical, and we just connect in a much more intimate way. It's in Kabbalah, we say that it's the hardest place. It's the greatest correction. It's maybe the most powerful correction between man and woman, but it's easier to start in a group. It's easier to start in a more neutral kind of setting where you begin to practice this sort of mindset, and then you learn how to implement it within your relationship. But I still believe that we need these tools. I mean, that's not to say that if you don't have that group, you shouldn't learn about what spiritual, happy relationships look like. And there are lots of tools and there are lots of skills, and I teach them in my course about how you can add more awareness and the right kind of attitude to your relationship so you can shift from that ever-ending conflict where we're each thinking about our own needs into a place where we can create some shared space between us and experience that fullness I was talking about before, that well of love and happiness that is experienced when we connect to something higher than us, when we can connect to spirit, to nature, and we become a kind of vessel for that love.
I
Something
love
we
that concept.
You know what? I've been watching this series on Netflix, Indian Matchmaker, and it is fascinating because we're really looking at a culture where a matchmaker is held as a very important guide in helping young people navigate their choices. And you see over the course of this show how she works to give feedback to the individuals about where they're holding back, where they're being too judgmental, what aspects they need to yield to. And for me, it really makes me think about the force of the guide in our lives and in the lives of young people, in the lives of anybody, any of us who are navigating the difficulties of relationship, of really making the commitment to the one. And rather than just consulting that voice in your head that brings in so much doubt, right? I see a lot of young people and they're now calling it relationship OCD, where they start to obsess on, is this person really the right one? Is there someone better out there? I don't feel like I'm getting my need met. I don't know. And it's just a loop that is creates so much suffering both ways. So I was just curious on your thoughts about that kind of archetypal role of the one who helps navigate relationship.
Yeah, I think we all need to be, like I said before, it's like we have the relationship and we can do a lot to work on it, but we need that support. It can be a guide, it can be a teacher, and it should also be an environment, because doing this work, it's a work where each person has their ego, their triggers, their past patterns, their judgments, all of these things, we call them crimes, right? The crimes, the places where we judge, the places where we can't accept another person, where each person is like a whole world, right? We're each different. And we come into a relationship in the beginning, we're very far from each other. And we need to constantly rise above those crimes, those judgments, those negative patterns to gradually close that gap. And doing this work isn't always easy because we're so attached to our opinions and to thinking that we're right and to our judgments,
Hmm.
that to rise above this nature that we have and all those patterns that we have, we need a lot of support and we need a lot of guidance. And I would even say we need a higher power to help us do it. Rising above our egoistic nature takes a higher power. And so it's something that we need to do together. Ultimately, we're also a network. And so if most of this network like currently is it's bogged down by an egoistic consciousness, it's harder for each of us separately to do this, to rise above our ego and connect to another person. And we have to really forego our opinions. Sometimes we have to say, you know what, I think this way, but our connection is more important to me. So I don't want to fight you about it. I'm willing to connect with you. And then we hug it out and we fix the situation. And by the way, these conflicts that come up, the places where we find division and arguments and all that, these things are actually, they become the fuel of our love. Because when we know how to turn the negative into higher connection, greater deeper love, then these conflicts or the ego itself, they become the things that grow our love and make it better and new and sustainable over time, instead of separating us. But to be able to do that, we need as many people as possible to be doing it with us, to give us the strength to do that, to always rise above what we've been, used to doing our whole lives. We need a lot of support for that.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I think the work with other people can give us the ability to discern. And in a lot of the teachings, the older teachings, it talks about discernment as something very, very important. When we worked with, the first time we ever worked with a curandera, Bertha Valdez, one of the things she said to us was, you have to learn to discern who you should be working with, who you shouldn't be working with. You can't just blindly trust. You have to have that ability to see who is going to be somebody that can guide you, somebody that you can work with. And if you can't, you need to turn that person over to somebody else. A curandera is a healer, right? So, or you need to also look in yourself. When things go wrong, why wasn't I able to discern that this was going to happen or this person was going to be that way? And so discernment is a very, very important concept. And one of the things that we've heard, Marianne and I have heard recently or over the last couple of years, is that with devices, everybody's using devices and looking down. Children have lost the ability to discern physical cues, facial cues, or even vibrational cues, emotional cues. So this is something that we have to relearn, and we can be guided to by cultures and elders who have that ability.
Yeah, and I was actually thinking about it before when you were talking about young people who feel ashamed about wanting to know more and to expand their awareness. And as you were talking about youth, I'm thinking about how lacking it is, how much we need those kind of teachings to really help us understand
Right.
ourselves, to understand what's happening within us. Why are we feeling certain ways? And then when we understand ourselves, we can begin to understand others and understand our relationships. I remember growing up as a teenager, and I remember feeling so empty and so lost and feeling all kinds of emotions, and nobody was there to really teach me what to do with it. High school, it was all about getting the grades and being popular, and I think we all feel that. And when you have no guidance about who you are and how you're built and what to do with that and how to connect to other people, I think as young people that can feel so bad, and for all of us, but for young people especially. And so, and today with the screens and the technology, it's even worse because kids are they're not learning how to connect on even the most basic levels. They're losing those skills, like you said. So for all these reasons, we need more teachings about connection.
One of our revisions, Maddi and I have, is this idea of having a wisdom course in every school, every high school, where you get to study the wisdom teachings from different disciplines, and just make it part of the curriculum. Like, let's start to look at, because like you said, once it's activated, that seeking of something deeper, a deeper meaning, a deeper purpose, then there is a certain level that the journey will take you where you need to go, right? In its own time. It's just magnetic, which I love that thought of that, but it does need to be activated, right? There's a call that needs to get stirred up.
Yes.
Exactly. So I think that is a good place to leave this discussion, and we will be very, very happy about continuing on with Tal next weekend as we talk about some big things. Something we already brought up with technology is the concept of just because we can doesn't mean we should. So this whole, we're on the precipice of AI. And is that really good for us? This concept of putting chips in heads and, and neuro enhancing drugs, and the teachings, the spiritual teachings of Kabbalah and other traditions cause us to slow down and ask the big questions. I feel like a lot of times we're not asking the right questions. If we've got $11 billion spent every year in the United States on antidepressants, the question should be, why are we all so depressed? I mean, that's an indicator. And that's where I think we're going to go next week. We're going to ask some of these big questions we've alluded to. Tal, thank you so much for being with us. You want to give some contact info, and especially your course that you're talking about, Finding the One, and then we'll also post that, friends, on the Women's Oneness Project.
Sure. So first of all, I really enjoyed this conversation, as I always enjoy being with you, Maddi, and so great to meet you, Marianne. I really just cherish this kind of place where we can really touch upon such important topics for all of us right now. If you want to know more, so my website is choosingtoconnect.com, and my course Finding the One is right there on my website, so anybody can just go in there and find it. And also I'm on Instagram, Tal.Mandelbaum on Instagram. I'd be really happy to connect.
Wonderful. So thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Bobby, so much for everything you do for us. Bobby Lacera, our producer, and everyone at Strong Island Entertainment. We really appreciate your having us on here. And we will see you next week again with Tal Mandelbaum. Check out her website. It's beautiful. And her blogs and her writings, just really, really a great place to go if you're looking for advice and teachings about connection. So thank you, everybody, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.